As we're sitting close to the day of the election, and in light of today's gospel, Jesus makes a point when he's confronted with this political issue, you could say, the census tax, which is a broader point and a simple point, but one I'd like to draw out a little bit. So when Jesus says, give to Caesar what belongs to Caesar, and to God what belongs to God, what is he saying there? Is he advocating that, our political life belongs over here, and our relationship to God belongs over here, kind of separating Caesar from God, you could say? What sort of Venn diagram is he drawing, could you say? Or is he saying, perhaps, that you should put the fruit in one compartment of the tray, the vegetables in the other, and never the twain shall meet? Of course, this is not what Jesus is saying. But I want to invite you for a second just to really consider this passage in your imagination, vividly picture it, because I think that helps us understand a little bit what Jesus is speaking about. So Jesus, right, he's teaching in the midst of this great crowd in Jerusalem, probably in the temple area. He had just driven out the sellers from the temple area a little bit before. And they come to him asking this question about the Roman census tax, so he asks them for a coin. So again, picture this very vividly in your mind. They hand to him a coin, right? Nothing big, just a little small thing. He inspects it and then asks whose image is on it. When they answer, then he hands the coin back to them and says, repay to Caesar what belongs to Caesar. And you can imagine him making this grand sweeping gesture, and to God what belongs to God, right? And I think just that little image can help us to understand the perspective that Jesus is inviting us into. This perspective, that if you want to put it in a Venn diagram, is that our life in the political sphere is important, right? All of us are called to bring the gospel there. And it is a part of everything. And it's within the greater and broader picture of that we ought to give everything to God. Caesar created this little coin, but God created the whole world and all that is in it. So that means for us that rather than politics being, one fruit in the tray and then our faith being the vegetables in the other part, instead, faith, you could say, is the tray, and all of the good stuff that we have should be placed upon it. Jesus, is telling us that everything in the realm of our life belongs to him and should be put in the matter and in the perspective of faith. Recall for an instant, too, that when the Pharisees were entering into this discussion with Jesus, it says they were trying to entrap him. But we know that Jesus can't be entrapped or contained or limited into our small ideas. But instead, he is the truth that contains, envelops, and permeates all things. And we should really come to know him in that way. That all of our life, no part of our life is without a place where we can bring Jesus into it. We want to bring him into everything that we do, even and including our political life too. And so that really is the relationship between faith and politics that we hear a little bit about Jesus speaking to us in this gospel. And the simple point that I really wanted to make, that everything we do, it should be brought into the perspective of our faith. Because as we've come to know and love Jesus, and to know and love him in his teaching too, that goes into all of the areas of our life. So it remains for us, especially in these days, to work on forming our conscience too. This is a responsibility for each one of us. And as I say that too, it's not something that anybody can do for us. We have to each work on forming our conscience ourselves. And I thought it'd be helpful to mention a little quote from the USCCB's document, Forming Consciences for Faithful Citizenship, on what this forming of conscience entails as we look at, the election coming up and other political decisions too that are coming in the present and will be there in the future too. So the document puts it this way, and just as a sort of side note, highly recommend that you check out reading the whole thing, Forming Consciences for Faithful Citizenship. It's got a lot of beautiful and good points about how do we allow our faith to permeate our political life too. And this is the simple point it makes towards the beginning of the document. So the formation of conscience includes several elements. First, there is a desire to embrace goodness and truth. For Catholics, this begins with a willingness and openness to seek the truth and what is right by studying sacred scripture and the teaching of the Church, as contained in the Catechism of the Catholic Church. It also is important to examine the facts and the background information about various choices. Then, prayerful reflection is essential to discern the will of God. So put very well in a small matter. And I want you to hear behind all of that too. What is this inviting us to as we look at how our faith comes into the political life? It's inviting us to talk to Jesus, really, is essentially what it's asking us to do. To open ourselves to the truth that he wishes to speak. To study what he teaches us in sacred scripture and in the teaching of the Church, which as Catholics we know is one of the ways he communicates himself to us in revelation, both scripture and tradition. And to really dive into that and enter into dialogue with Jesus. And that's why there's that prayerful reflection aspect of all of it. We'll probably come up against parts that we find challenging too, but we know that when Jesus teaches and he speaks to us, he comes to bring us life and to bring us joy, to give it to us in the full. And so even though we might have to wrestle with some things that are challenges to us, we know that as we do so, we'll be coming closer to the Lord and following his way, which is the path to life. Like we heard about in the opening prayer for today's Mass too, that we can conform our will to his. As we are approaching Election Day, as we're thinking about political life, but as something that's really broader than just all of that, the important thing is for us that our faith be really the foundation, and that we really dig into our relationship with the Lord and allow him to speak into every aspect of our life, including the political life too. So that, as we give to Caesar what belongs to Caesar, we also give to God what belongs to God, remembering that God is the one who created everything, created the whole world and all that is in it. And so we give it back to him by giving him ourself, entrusting ourselves to him and following in his ways.